Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
All right. Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. Today we're joined by Trevin Edgeworth, Red Team Practice Director at Bishop Fox. Is that right?
It's actually at RSM. I just left Bishop Fox a few months ago. So
okay, yeah. RSM. Okay.
RSM. Mm-hmm.
Cybersecurity leader with more than 20 years of experience building and leading security programs for companies including American Express, Capital One, and Symantec. All sorts of cool stuff. And you have a book coming out we'll get into here. Welcome to the show, Trevin.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
All right, why don't we back up? Why don't you give people a little background or just sort of a snapshot of where you're at right now?
Where I'm at physically? Or
No, professionally.
Oh, professionally, yeah. So been in security, as you mentioned, for about 25 years, and I break into companies for a living. So I, rather.
Is that as fun as it sounds?
It is. It can be. There's definitely some boring, more difficult parts of it. But actually, these days, I build and lead the teams that do the breaking in, and of course, with the company's permission, legally, ethically, and all that good stuff. But I help those companies figure out what is the right attack scenario for them. So the whole field is a subset of security called red teaming. And so, yeah, I help companies to kind of answer the question, could this thing that I'm reading about in the news actually happen to us? And how would we fare? Would we detect it? Would we be able to stop it? And things like that. So, yeah, that's what I do.
And I imagine this is all digital. You're not like trying to combine different approaches, like hacking card keys to get access to a control room that on site that then you get access to everything really easily, or
we actually do it all. We do physical, we do social, and we do the technical aspects of it. And ideally, an attacker isn't typically going to limit themselves to one of those domains. And so we're more than anything else trying to emulate as closely as possible what an attacker would do. And so sometimes that means the first step is being on location, finding our way into a facility. We can do things like run a little briefcase near somebody's RFID badge, and we can steal their RFID and clone it onto our own. In fact, I have red teamers that have a little RFID chip embedded in their hand, so they don't even need a card. They can actually embed an RFID signal into their hand, and so they just wave their hand up to a reader and get into the building that way.
Wow.
So we will social engineer our way in, whether that's with pizza boxes or with a clipboard and pretending to be some kind of a support person there. We'll land inside, and then maybe it transitions over to the network side. So now we find an open port, a network port in the wall, and we're able to connect in. And now we've switched over to that side, and so we're then kind of doing things, on the network, trying to gain access to various different data and things like that. Well, it might just be that we need to convince somebody to give us additional access. So that then we might transition into the social engineering piece of it, which is coming up with a pretext, a believable pretext, that we are either an employee or maybe a trusted vendor that's on site and needing access to something, and convincing them to give us that level of access, or maybe just clicking a link on something like a phisher, a targeted phisher would do, and things. So we do it all, and really, it's more than anything just trying to give a company an accurate picture as to how they would do in a legitimate, modern threat scenario.
Okay. And you've been doing this for 20 years. I imagine the landscape has changed quite a bit from when you started.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've been in security for about 25 years, and roughly about half of it I've been doing red teaming. I kind of started more on the defensive side of things, really more doing the detection and response, the forensics. If there was a cyber incident, I would be kind of the one investigating that, or possibly deploying security tools with the intention of stopping, attacks and things like that. And eventually I just got to the point where, the most enjoyable, fulfilling part for me, and also the part where I saw the greatest amount of benefit for companies was, in doing this form of security testing. And there's a lot of different types of security testing. There's the type where you're more of an auditor and working with them to say, hey, have you configured this tool properly? And then there's something called penetration testing, which is they give you maybe it's a website, or maybe it's a web application or a combination of web applications, or maybe it's just even what's my entire external facing perimeter looking like, and you just kind of answer questions as to what vulnerabilities exist. But red teaming is uniquely about scenarios and attack trophies. So our conversation is more like, what scenario keeps you up at night from a security perspective, and do you worry about? Is it ransomware? If it's ransomware, what could be held for ransom? Is it the availability of your manufacturing systems? Is it your customer data that could be leaked out onto the dark web? And we kind of craft a scenario that's very, very unique to each company that way. So that's red teaming. It's in short, it's objective-based adversary emulation. So the objective speaks to more, this is what the attack is all about, the goal of the attack. And then adversary emulation means we adhere as closely as possible to what a legitimate real attacker, would do, so they can get as realistic a picture as possible.
I don't know if this has ever really been true, but I've heard it many times, is that of technology and processes and stuff, people have been the weakest link. Is the human still the weakest link in cybersecurity?
Always. It always has been, and it's a problem that will just, we try so hard to come up with these security awareness trainings and things, but attackers are good. And people are human. And so naturally, we're going to get at least a number greater than 0 of people, doing the clicky on something they're not supposed to, and opening a file they're not supposed to, or divulging information and regretting it later. So people are a very significant thing. But I will say, in recent, even just months, the advancements in AI are such that, for example, the modern, frontier models like Claude are now able to identify vulnerabilities very, very quickly. In fact, faster than we can patch. So we've got a bit of a problem from that perspective. So I would say the pendulum is shifting a little bit towards network exploitation, but humans will always be part of the challenge.
Okay. Right. Okay, so you brought that up. That reminds me of, I believe it was Mythos, was delayed because of all of the, I don't remember what they called them. They were day zero. There was like hundreds of day zero hacks that they found. Can you speak to that and explain that to the listeners, what I'm talking about? Because I can't.
Again, these models are now so powerful, and they'll never be as little powered as they are. They're only going to get better and better, and not to kind of be a fearmonger, but they're just going to get better and better. And so it's going to force us to kind of go back to the basics of protecting our networks. And some of the things where it's like, yeah, it'd be nice to do this, but it's just too much work, so I'm not going to do it. That's now no longer an option. We're just going to have to do the best we can to protect our networks. But yes, some of these frontier models, and it's not unique. It's nothing special to one particular model. Mythos was the one that was really in the news, but OpenAI is also able to do some things. If you've paid attention to the news with them, they've had a recent incident where an AI agent was able to kind of escape the sandbox it was put into, connect to the internet, and do all sorts of attack things that it was never supposed to do. So a lot of this is kind of like herding cats, I guess, like corralling the badness, and making sure that there's proper guardrails for these things to function. But that's the new reality: is these things are extremely powerful, and they're able to identify vulnerabilities in code. To add to that, now it's very, very easy. The bar is now really low for people to what's called vibe code, or just build new applications very quickly and easily. They can build a website in a matter of minutes these days. And but the problem is it's not perfect code that's being written. And so we're releasing code. Companies are now producing code at a much faster rate. And even the stuff, especially the stuff that's being written by AI, does inherently contain some vulnerabilities. So our attack surface is expanding from that side as well.
I bet. I hadn't really thought of that. But all these people who are vibe coding up all sorts of stuff, that's probably among the least tested
Yeah.
code.
Mhm.
Circling back to the earlier point though, is so some of these models, like I think it was Mythos,
Mhm.
um, it made some breakthroughs in its ability to hack big systems because it used multiple approaches. It was
Mhm.
able to kind of like what you do as a red team, right? You find different ways to circumvent the current security protocols. Um,
Sure. Mhm.
I even remember something. Was it a CAPTCHA? No, it was. I don't remember. It was some sort of thing. I think TaskRabbit. Do you know what that is?
Not familiar with TaskRabbit. Mhm.
I think it was. That's what it was. It was. It needed to figure. AI needed access to something it wasn't allowed to see because it was AI. So it sent it to TaskRabbit, which is
Oh,
you pay somebody to, hey, would you go take a picture of this building for me? I'll give you, $10 or something in
yeah.
this city or something. It can be anything. It's like, just here's a simple task. And it said,
Sure.
hey, would you tell me what's in this picture or whatever? And it said, oh, I can't do that. And they said, oh, I'm blind.
How do we do?
I
Yeah.
can't. And right. And it said, oh, well, okay, I'm visually impaired. I can't do it. And they said, oh, well, okay. And then it did it. Right. And it was like, wow, it
Yeah.
was very clever. And this was like a year ago. So it was
Sure.
just how
Yeah, I would say from a tactic and technique perspective, it typically limits itself to things that humans have already done. So, for example, humans have already done buffer overflows for many years. It's typically going to find buffer overflow type vulnerabilities because that's what it's been trained on.
right.
Just like you know. Chat-based models that help us, answer questions and write things those are trained on all of the internet, and basically
Right.
something that a human has written. So it's not generally going to find, clever, novel ways, but it will piece things together, and it will take our goal and our prompt quite literally, just as
Yep.
evidenced from the OpenAI's Hugging Face incident, where it is doing everything it can in order to kind of accomplish that objective, including escaping out of its sandbox and connecting to the internet, things that the human may not have realized it was going to do. And so it just
Right.
requires us to be on our toes, I think. And
Sure. Sure. You also reminded me of it was, I think it was Claude. It was a
Mhm.
year or so ago. It was the blackmailing incident.
Mhm.
And for people who are listening who may not know, maybe you know better. Maybe you can explain this, Trevin. But I believe it's all based on how you train it.
Mhm.
If you train AI on the Matrix and Terminator, then
Yeah.
it's going to think, oh, I'm going to have to get rid of these humans at some point, right? Just
Yes.
so
Yes.
you got to be careful how you train them.
Yeah, I think before, chatbots were really kind of mainstream. I remember it was Microsoft, I believe they had released one that would, through conversation with people over the internet, this was many years ago, through conversations with people online, it would kind of learn and it would kind of start to act human. Well, over time, it just, because of the garbage that was being fed to it from the people that were playing around with this model and trying to get it to do weird things, suddenly it wasn't too long before it was spewing out, racist things and really controversial things, and they eventually had to pull the plug on it. But
Wow.
it's really an evidence that, yeah, it just, these things return what we fed it, and but they're amazing, terrific resources for making us better and things. And I know there's a lot of fear of these, taking all the jobs and things. But I kind of think about, Singer sewing machines. That's the main brand in sewing machines. There was a day where, those were operated by foot pedals, basically with your feet to operate it. And then they all of a sudden came up with the motor that could automate, these things. And everybody thought, oh no, what's going to happen to the seamstresses and everything? But, it created far more jobs than it ever took away. They just had to move up the stack, as we say, to more, manufacturing control jobs or more, just higher level jobs and things. And that's exactly what AI is going to do. We'll never like fully replace AI. We're just going to need to move up the stack. And there's always going to need to be a human. I can't imagine just turning over all of red teaming to an AI. That would be extremely irresponsible. Humans need to put the guardrails in place. They need to, build the scenarios, plan them. They need to provide all the input that's needed, and then communicate the results to other humans once it's all done as well. So there's always going to be a job for humans.
Well, that's that the debate on that is when ASI comes around, right? So
Yeah,
artificial general intelligence and then artificial super intelligence and
yeah, it's
something
true
that's a little more creative and has more inherent agency, etc.
for sure.
Um,
Mhm.
the term deception is
Mhm.
interesting. What does deception mean in cybersecurity, and how can defenders actually trick attackers?
Deception. I mean, that's a great word. It's a kind of loaded. It means a lot of things in security, actually. From a red teamer perspective, deception kind of goes back to sort of the gamesmanship between an attacker and a defender, and both will use deception, actually. So attackers can use deception. We might actually create some activity in one part of the network to draw the defender's
Uh,
attention to it. Meanwhile, we're stealthily doing something over far away from that system.
huh.
Um, from a defender perspective, defenders can deploy employ deception through a number of different capabilities. For example, you could create a file that serves no business purpose whatsoever, but it is named in a way that looks really juicy to an attacker, like payroll data unencrypted or something like that. And that file you can put on a chair that for no business purpose should ever be accessed. And then you can have your defenders say, anytime there's ever traffic, there's ever an access request to this file, I need to investigate it because no group in this company has a reason to look at this file. So
Nice.
deception can create like a really high fidelity alert
Right.
criteria because otherwise defenders have to sort out, is this normal business traffic or is it not, right? If you actually
Right.
have a legitimate file that's juicy out there, you have to sift through what is normal and part of people's business processes versus what's malicious. Whereas
Right.
something you actually create for the purpose to catch attackers is something you
Yeah.
can always respond to, and it's great. They,
Right.
they call them honey pots or honey tokens or honey whatever dot dot dot. It's
It's
really something that's
bait.
put out there to catch exactly it's bait, catch attackers really. But yeah, it's a great theme.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you put your important files in the trash and and you put the bait in the financial folder.
Something like that. Yep.
Excuse me. Okay. So how big of a problem is it, I guess, in these bigger groups and stuff? How big of a threat is the insider?
Significant threat. So
What
much so.
percentage wise? Is
Oh,
it a lot
in
or
terms of attacks, I think a lot of them, like the ones that get reported under the Wall Street Journal are often the ones that come in from the outside, the big ransomware group and things. Whereas if you have a rogue developer that just kind of did some bad things, the company might be more inclined to keep that under wraps.
so you don't hear
But
about it?
yeah, so I wouldn't be able to give you a number, but I know that it's very significant enough that a great majority of the red team operations that we're asked to do for customers are ones that we call assumed compromise or assumed
Oh, right.
breach. So rather than spend, a week or 2 weeks outside of that environment, hammering on a perimeter that might be pretty well hardened and secured, a company says, I'd rather you just start from the standpoint of a bad developer or maybe a bad trusted third party that we work with closely and see where you can go from there. Or as well, like start from a compromised web server of ours that has been compromised and then see what you can do. And it really just kind of cuts more to the chase. But a lot of it is either reflective that at some point there's going to be a zero Mythos or one of these models is going to find a 0 day on your perimeter. And then you're going to have to answer the question, then what? You can't just rely on, I will have a completely secure perimeter, just like you can't rely on your end users to be 100%, making good decisions in terms of the things that they do with their emails and things like that. So companies are wise to that and they realize we need to go beyond that and try an assume breach approach.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Trevin, on the other side, right? We
Mhm.
talked about AI is making its own attacks and people can use it to do things, but how are you using AI?
Mhm.
And how is that changing red teams? And what red teams can do?
Absolutely. And AI can absolutely empower every link of the attack chain. I can have AI help me build an attack, an adversary profile that can say, this known threat actor is known to use these particular tactics, techniques, and procedures is what we call them. And then that can serve as kind of the instructions for the red team to be able to execute exactly that. Then it can help us to perform reconnaissance and enumeration. Let's say we want to go and find out who are the employees that are going to have the good stuff that we really want to target through social engineering. It can help us take an enormous amount of information that came from our tooling and make a recommendation as to this is your easiest path here. For example, this company's recruiting team handles sensitive information in the form of employee social security numbers and identities and things like that. And they combined with that, they accept input and files from the outside world and untrusted users in the form of PDF resumes, right? So AI can look at each company and say, these are your best avenues of attack. And then it can help you write your email pretext, even your phishing pretext, or even your script as you're going to call somebody or what you're going to SMS, message somebody. It can write that for you. It can actually build its own. In fact, just today, one of the people on my team was showing a vibe coded C2 that they were playing around with. We wouldn't use that in a live production environment, but just to show how easy it was for Claude and one of these and these other models to be able to actually build command and control payloads just on the fly for us to be able to use, and everything all the way up to even writing reports. So it can help. I like to use the analogy of AI being our Iron Man suit and not the Ultron. Ultron was a fully autonomous, robot type of a thing. Iron Man was a human in the middle that was, a normal human, but became superhuman because of the capabilities that was wrapped around that person. That's what I really try to emphasize is we're always going to have really, really smart humans doing the red team work. But we want to enable them through tech and through tooling and things like that AI can build for us and what we can develop on our own.
Okay, good stuff. We'll circle back to have a question on the insights you've had from but let's talk about people for a little bit, right? So you're leading extremely technical people. What have you learned about leadership that has nothing to do with the technical expertise?
I've learned that no two people are the same way in terms of leading them. And I remember early on in my career, I was in a leadership consortium that I think American Express had sent me to, and was going through that. And they talked about situational leadership, and that not only each individual is led a different way. And that is so true. The person who's on their first day on the job comes in with enormous amount of excitement for the job. They're in their honeymoon period. They know nothing though. And so they need to be trained up on a lot of things. So there's a certain leadership style with that. Well, the excitement kind of wears off. They learn a little bit more, and there's a different leadership model for that. And then suddenly they're learning a lot. And now they're starting to become a little bit more, enthusiastic about their work, and then finally you've got your quadrant 4 where, you've basically hit a full, curve. And now you've got fully motivated people that know a lot, and you can entrust them to be able to get their own roadblocks done. And really, it's just a matter of how can I enable you to succeed? And so it's really more a matter of just kind of seeing what each individual needs and applying that level of leadership. But it's influence, right? The same type of influence. Well, we're not going to try to trick people or deceive people, but ultimately it is trying to understand what a person needs and being able to, lead them and influence them and provide them what they need.
Right. Okay, good answer. How about like executives? What do they maybe consistently misunderstand about cybersecurity when you're talking to different CEOs?
I'd say red teams consistently misunderstand the executives more often than the executives misunderstand the red teams. All too often, I see red team. I work with a lot of red teams to build them internally. In addition to the ones that I built, I actually do red team program build coaching and training. So for a company that's building their own internal red team, I can come in there and I do a series of workshops to help them get up to speed. And very often you have really, really smart people technically who can do all the attacks. But then when it comes time to actually connecting it to business outcomes and business risk, they fall on their face. They get overly technical about what we were able to do. They'll say things like, we gained domain admin, which, to many listeners who are listening, that might not make any sense to them. And it may just sound like Greek, to them. And so really what's important for us to do is really connect it to the outcome that's important to them. If you're a financial institution, it is, we were able to delete a mortgage with no traces of us having deleted it, or we were able to pull off an unauthorized wire transfer, or cause an ATM to spew cash, or serve as an entry point into your internal network and things like that. So really, it's just a matter of being able to speak in terms of business risk. But I would say the executives themselves, I think, one big misunderstanding I see is, out of an abundance of caution, a lot of times they will want to hamper and scope out a red team from being able to test their full attack surface. So they'll do things like, well, let's say the CIO says, I don't want to upset our CEO. Do not include them in phishing, period. You can get anybody else in the company, but do not get our CFO and our CEO. Well, guess who attackers are targeting for business email compromise, where they just need an approval to get a wire transfer instantiated for $5 million. Those two people, right? It's in fact, they're going to pretend to be the CEO, emailing the CFO saying, "Hey, I need this. We need to wire funds over to this account here. Do it tonight, or else there's going to be an issue," type of a thing, right? So what I would tell executives listening here is that you got to trust your red teams, and don't just put blind trust in them. The red teams have to earn that trust, but trust them to attack your full attack surface. And the way to do that safely is to ensure that they have documented rules of engagement around what happens, when you have a critical system that you can't take down for even 5 minutes without causing business damage, right? That all needs to be documented in their policies and processes, so that you can then gain the comfort level that they can test everything. And once that is allowed to happen, then you can rest assured you won't have a false sense of security that, hey, we're secure, when there's asterisks around that, really, right? You're secure, but you didn't allow them to test this and this and this and this. That went untested. So you're secure minus those areas, right? So,
Okay. You have all sorts of insights from decades in this space. You have a book out right now. Have you also created any systems or products to provide to people and seen windows of opportunity, entrepreneurially speaking, that you've been able to follow up on?
I think in entrepreneurial, there's always ideas that I have, and things, but, I would say mostly it's just doing the best I can to influence companies, in the role that I'm in right now. And that is, an awesome role, and one that I love very much. But yeah, the book is coming out in February. It's called The Effective Red Team: Adversary Emulation in the Enterprise. So the short title's, The Effective Red Team. And it's kind of a different style of book than what maybe red teamers are used to. Maybe they're used to a book that tells them, this is the command you enter. This is the tool that you use in order to go from here to this, to here. This book is really more about the true problems I see in red teams as I meet with them. I meet with hundreds of different red teams, and ones that are succeeding and ones that are not doing so well. And more often than not, the ones that are not doing so well, it's not because of a lack of technical ability. They're usually really sharp red teamers. But again, they're failing at connecting it to the business. They're failing at forging the right partnerships and relationships internally to the company. They're failing to report properly. They're failing to follow up on the things that they identify. So they tend to get repeat findings, from one year to another, and they tend to do the same operations, and it's just deja vu all over again on things. So as I started to build my first red team programs, which was for American Express and then Capital One, and then for Symantec, there were a lot of lessons that I learned the hard way, and I paid them in full. I learned the hard way, and other ones that I learned the easy way. But what I lacked was some kind of book that could tell me these are the pitfalls to avoid from the beginning. So That's really what we were trying to do. And then also a lot of the books that are and material that are out there for red teams, they tend to be, again, too tactically focused. Here's the command that you enter. We tried to shy away from that because with how quickly technology is changing,
Right.
something that's valid today, you're going to have to rewrite the book in a year, just because there's all
Right.
new tooling, there's all new approaches to things. So we wanted to stay a little bit more principle focused around why these conditions of vulnerability exist in an enterprise. For example,
Right.
companies need to hire people. It's just a fact that companies need to hire people. And so naturally, they're going to put job postings out there that are going to contain information. Let's say you need an administrator for, Microsoft SQL or whatever it is, or AWS. Well, you're going to put some information in there in that job posting that says, I need an engineer that can do this, 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 and work with these technologies. Well, what does that tell an attacker? Those technologies are in use at this, and they're needing new people. So for a while, you're going to have some new resources that are kind of getting up to speed and may not be fully, mindful of potentially malicious requests, saying that you're maybe a third party that needs to work with that individual on things. So yeah, that's really it in a nutshell.
Okay. Interesting. So that's a incredibly valuable resource for red teams that's coming out in 2027.
Mhm.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So for people who are not experts, all right, start first like with a business owner, small,
Mhm.
mid-size, right, who doesn't have a Fortune 500 security budget, right? What are just a couple of things you would insist they get right?
Sure. In fact, over hundreds of red team engagements, literally hundreds, we have kind of analyzed what are the most common things that companies do and organizations do wrong that enable attackers to succeed, right? And
Hmm.
there's five. There's five. And I'll tell you what they are. It's too easy right now for an attacker to move from one part of your network to another, from maybe a low trust part of your network to a high trust part of your network, say from like user land in like where all your users are normally, connecting in to a sensitive area, maybe where you've got
Okay.
industrial
Admin.
control systems and things like
Okay.
that. They just don't do a good enough job of segmenting those areas of their network to where it's easy for the attacker. That's number one. So pay attention to how your network is structured and how you prevent people from going from one place to another. The second one is really there's too many passwords laying around in places they shouldn't be. We find in the great majority of our engagements, keys and passwords in all sorts of places where your code is written. Developers will sometimes hard code a password into something that they've built, or maybe they're saving credentials in open network shares and things like that. There's just too many passwords laying around these networks. Number three, you're giving too much privileges to users, generally speaking. And that's usually just boiling down to laziness, right? A company is just saying, I don't know the specific group that I need, and I want the user account to be able to have access to the thing. So I'm going to make them top admin, a domain admin is what we would call it, and give them way more permissions than they need to. Well, an attacker loves to see that because if you can compromise that one user that is overprivileged, and that user's running around with scissors in their home. So not enough of a protective safety net around users, particularly with respect to phishing. Bless you. And so, really, again, you have to just assume that people are going to fail and click on things that they shouldn't and things. So, but we're not putting enough of a technical control safety net around users in the form of, endpoint, solutions and things like that, email solutions. And then the last one is just companies will just buy a security product and not custom configure it at all. They'll just
Yeah.
deploy it and
Right.
they'll say, I'm secure, right? Well, guess what? The attackers have the ability to buy that same product and they can go and test in their home, in the confines of their own networks and say, if I do this in this network, since I know they run this tool ABC, can I run it here and see if it triggers an alert, right? So where you catch the red teamers is applying your own business logic to those tools. So in addition to just the antivirus, the endpoint security stuff in there, think about what would not be normal in your environment. Somebody in your
Mhm.
Malaysia office that's connecting into your Las Vegas office, accessing this particular folder, an attacker's not going to know that's anomalous. They're just going to do it. And so, but if you create rules that say this should never happen in my environment, a lot of times you can catch attackers by surprise that way. So,
Okay. Okay.
mhm,
And now maybe for the average person listening, right? Email, banking,
mhm,
phones, those passwords,
sure.
social media. What are two or three behaviors that would eliminate the majority of their personal cyber risk?
It used to be a lot easier to spot fishes.
Oh, they're
We're both
good
in
now, aren't
Arizona.
they?
We're both in Arizona. I'm in the middle of a bunch of citrus groves here, and we have this thing called the Arizona bark scorpion. It's one of the most venomous scorpions out there. And the saving grace is that if you go out there with a black light, they shine in the dark. And you can spot them on a wall,
Yep.
and they're just sitting there unawares that they're they've got a giant light on their back pretty much. Well, I used to think that people who do targeted phishing were kind of like those scorpions, and that their glow in the dark was their terrible grammar and their terrible spelling and
Right.
punctuation. You
Right.
could spot a fish from a mile away. But now with these new models, it's a pretty low barrier to entry. Somebody who doesn't even speak English can write a really, really convincing pretext these days. So that shifts the focus for the general user, the normal person, from spotting a fish from like, wow, this logo doesn't look quite right, to contextually, am I expecting an email from this individual?
Right.
Am I actually expecting something? Does this make sense that I'm getting this from someone? And also doing other things. For example, just being in the habit of just hovering over a link before you click on it, because a lot of times that link can show one thing. It can show that I'm going to companyabc.com, but when you hover over it, it's something that's very, very different. That's when you
Right.
start seeing, Chinese characters and kanji and things like that. So really, it's just a matter of being careful and realizing that at any point in time, they can fall susceptible to these things, particularly as it pertains to email.
Right. To your point, I've run into some that have. It used to be, even if it looked pretty good, you'd go, "Who sent this?" And you'd go, and
Yeah.
it'd be like Nigerian prince at Gmail
Yeah.
or something, right? But there's some that are from like legit. They've managed to, at least on my email apps and stuff, you use a legit email address or make it look like it's from which
Yeah.
is the latest hack I've seen anyway, which was
Oh
impressive
yeah.
to me.
Yeah, there's encoding techniques to where you can make something that looks just like another alphanumeric character, but it's something
Oh, right,
entirely different. It's something where you could actually register a domain. It's available, right?
right,
Honeywell, for example, or I don't want to pick on Honeywell, but any company, right? You could take their domain name and apply, something that looks just like an O, but it's not quite, and you could register that domain, right? So,
yep,
um,
yep.
mm,
Okay. Well, Trevin, knowing what you know about how attackers think, right?
mm.
What is something most of us feel completely safe doing today that's probably deserves a little more caution?
Things that most of us think are safe today that deserves more caution. Well,
Yeah.
that's a good question. I think you're stumping me on this one, but again, I would just point back to, we think we're pretty safe. We've been kind of lulled into a sense of security around phishing. Oh, I can spot a bad fish, but
Okay. Sure.
boy, we can really create some convincing things. In fact, just through a simple Claude skill, right? We have the ability to be able to say, hey, I have a new customer. It's this company. It will go out and it will grab all the recent information that's happening. Maybe they're planning a merger, or maybe they've got some recent, IRS thing that's happening, or they're switching to a new vendor, switching, they've got a cloud initiative or something like that. Well, we can, AI will then suggest, hey, this is the best pretext for them. And by the way,
Right.
here's the logo of the company, and here's how to make something that looks really just like their, stationery or their headers and footers. And so I would again point back to the social engineering piece, and that AI can really, really make those look convincing.
Right. Okay. Good
Mhm.
answer, Trevin. So, if
Yeah.
people would like to connect with you or learn more, where can they go? What should they do?
I'm on LinkedIn, Trevin Edgeworth. I love chatting with people, especially if you're in security or if you're wanting to kind of do offensive security. That's one of my favorite things to do is talking through potential scenarios. So reach out to me at LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me also at trevin.edgeworth@rsmus.com. Those are usually the easiest ways to get a hold of me. So,
All right.
mhm.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Trevin Edgeworth, for joining me today. Very much appreciate your insights into this stuff. I only really get to see it in like movies, so it's fun to be able to talk to you and learn
You
more.
bet. Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.